Interactive fiction, often abbreviated IF, is software simulating environments in which players use text commands to control characters and influence the environment. Works in this form can be understood as literary narratives and as video games. In common usage, the term refers to text adventures, a type of adventure game where the entire interface can be text-only. Graphical text adventure games, where the text is accompanied by graphics, still fall under the text adventure category if the main way to interact with the game is text. Some users of the term distinguish between interactive fiction, that focuses on narrative, and text adventures, that focus on puzzles. Meanwhile, more expansive definitions of interactive fiction may include all adventure games, including wholly graphical adventures such as Myst. As a commercial product, interactive fiction reached its peak in popularity from 1979 to 1986. As a dominant software product marketed for home computers. Due to their text-only nature, they sidestepped the problem of writing for widely divergent graphics architectures. This meant that interactive fiction games were easily ported across all the popular platforms, including CP/M. Today, a steady stream of new works is produced by an online interactive fiction community, using freely available development systems. The term can also be used to refer to literary works that are not read in a linear fashion, known as gamebooks, where the reader is instead given choices at different points in the text. These decisions determine the flow and outcome of the story. The most famous example of this form of interactive fiction is the Choose Your Own Adventure book series, and the collaborative adventure format has also been described as a form of interactive fiction. Interactive fiction is sometimes used as a synonym for visual novel, a popular style of entertainment software in Japan. Medium. Text adventures are one of the oldest types of computer games and form a subset of the adventure genre. The player uses text input to control the game, and the game state is relayed to the player via text output. Input is usually provided by the player in the form of simple sentences such as, "Get key," or "Go east," which are interpreted by a text parser. Parsers may vary in sophistication. The first text adventure parsers could only handle two-word sentences in the form of verb-noun pairs. Later parsers, such as those built on Infocom's ZIL, could understand complete sentences. Later parsers could handle increasing levels of complexity, parsing sentences such as, "Open the red box with the green key, then go north." This level of complexity is the standard for works of interactive fiction today. Despite their lack of graphics, text adventures include a physical dimension where players move between rooms. Many text adventure games boasted their total number of rooms to indicate how much gameplay they offered. These games are unique in that they may create an illogical space, where going north from Area A takes you to Area B, but going south from Area B did not take you back to Area A. This can create mazes that do not behave as players expect, and thus players must maintain their own map. These illogical spaces are much more rare in today's era of 3D gaming, and the interactive fiction community in general decries the use of mazes entirely, claiming that mazes have become arbitrary puzzles for the sake of puzzles and that they can, in the hands of inexperienced designers, become immensely frustrating for players to navigate. Interactive fiction shares much in common with multi-user dungeons. MUDs, which became popular in the mid-1980s, rely on a textual exchange and accept similar commands from players as do works of IF. However, since interactive fiction is single-player, and MUDs, by definition, have multiple players, they differ enormously in gameplay styles. MUDs often focus gameplay on activities that involve communities of players, simulated political systems, in-game trading, and other gameplay mechanics that aren't possible in a single-player environment. Interactive fiction usually relies on reading from a screen and on typing input. Although text-to-speech synthesizers allow blind and visually impaired users to play interactive fiction titles as audio games, Writing style. Interactive fiction features two distinct modes of writing: the player input and the game output. As described above, player input is expected to be in simple command form. A typical command may be pull lever. The responses from the game are usually written from a second-person point of view, in present tense. This is because, unlike in most works of fiction, the main character is closely associated with the player, and the events are seen to be happening as the player plays. While older text adventures often identified the protagonist with the player directly, newer games tend to have specific, well-defined protagonists with separate identities from the player. The classic essay, Crimes Against Mimesis, discusses, among other issues, the nature of you in interactive fiction. A typical response might look something like this: the response to "Look into chest" at the start of Curses. That was the first place you tried, hours and hours ago now, and there's nothing there but that boring old book. You pick it up anyway, bored as you are. Many text adventures, particularly those designed for humor, address the player with an informal tone, sometimes including sarcastic remarks. The late Douglas Adams, in designing the IF version of his Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, created a unique solution to the final puzzle of the game. The game requires the one solitary item that the player didn't choose at the outset of play. Some IF works dispense with second-person narrative entirely, opting for a first-person perspective or even placing the player in the position of an observer, rather than a direct participant. In some experimental IF, the concept of self-identification is eliminated entirely, and the player instead takes the role of an inanimate object, a force of nature, or an abstract concept. Experimental IF usually pushes the limits of the concept and challenges many assumptions about the medium. History. Adventure. Around 1975, Will Crowther, a programmer and an amateur caver, wrote the first text adventure game, Adventure. Having just gone through a divorce, he was looking for a way to connect with his two young children. Over the course of a few weekends, he wrote a text-based cave exploration game that featured a sort of guide narrator who talked in full sentences and who understood simple two-word commands that came close to natural English. Adventure was programmed in Fortran for the PDP-10. Stanford University graduate student Don Woods discovered Adventure while working at the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, and in 1977 obtained and expanded Crowther's source code. Crowther's original version was an accurate simulation of part of the real Colossal Cave, but also included fantasy elements. Woods's changes were reminiscent of the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien, and included a troll, elves, and a volcano. Some claim is based on Mount Doom, but Woods says was not. In early 1977, Adventure spread across ARPANET, and has survived on the Internet to this day. The game has since been ported to many other operating systems, and was included with the floppy disk distribution of Microsoft's MS-DOS 5.0 OS. Adventure is a cornerstone of the online IF community. There currently exist dozens of different independently programmed versions, with additional elements, such as new rooms or puzzles, and various scoring systems. The popularity of Adventure led to the wide success of interactive fiction during the late 1970s and the 1980s, when home computers had little, if any, graphics capability. Many elements of the original game have survived into the present, such as the command Zizi, which is now included as an Easter egg in games such as Minesweeper. Adventure was also directly responsible for the founding of Sierra Online. Ken and Roberta Williams played the game and decided to design one of their own, but with graphics. By 1982, Softline wrote that the demands of the market are weighted heavily toward high-res graphics, in games like Sierra's The Wizard and the Princess and its imitators. Such graphic adventures became the dominant form of the genre on computers with graphics like the Apple II. Commercial-era Adventure International was founded by Scott Adams, In 1978, Adams wrote Adventureland, which was loosely patterned after the original Advent. He took out a small ad in a computer magazine in order to promote and sell Adventureland, thus creating the first commercial adventure game. In 1979 he founded Adventure International, the first commercial publisher of interactive fiction. By 1982 Adventure International began releasing versions of its games with graphics. The company went bankrupt in 1985. Infocom, the largest company producing works of interactive fiction, was Infocom, which created the Zork series and many other titles, among them Trinity, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Aim Ein Forever Voyaging. In June 1977, Mark Blank, Bruce Gay, Daniels, Tim Anderson, and Dave Lebeling began writing the mainframe version of Zork at the MIT Laboratory for Computer Science. The game was programmed in a computer language called MDL, a variant of Lisp. In early 1979, the game was completed. 10 members of the MIT Dynamics Modeling Group went on to join Infocom when it was incorporated later that year. In order to make its games as portable as possible, Infocom developed the Z Machine, a custom virtual machine which could be implemented on a large number of platforms, and which took standardized story files as input. In a non-technical sense, Infocom was responsible for developing the interactive style that would be emulated by many later interpreters. The Infocom parser was widely regarded as the best of its era. It accepted complex, complete sentence commands like, put the blue book on the writing desk, at a time when most of its competitors' parsers were restricted to simple two-word verb-noun combinations such as, put book. The parser was actively upgraded with new features like undo and error correction, and later games would understand multiple sentence input. Pick up the gem and put it in my bag. Take the newspaper clipping out of my bag, then burn it with the book of matches. By 1982, Infocom was the only company producing text-only adventure games on the Apple II with sophisticated parsers and writing, and by 1983 advertised its lack of graphics as a virtue. The company was bought by Activision in 1986 after the failure of Cornerstone, Infocom's database software program, and stopped producing text adventures a few years later. In 1991 and 1992, Activision released Volumes 1 and 2 of The Lost Treasures of Infocom, a collection containing most of Infocom's games, followed in 1996 by classic text-adventure masterpieces of Infocom. Legend Entertainment. Legend Entertainment was founded by Bob Bates and Mike Verdu in 1989. It started out from the ashes of Infocom. The text adventures produced by Legend used graphics as well as sound. Some of their titles include Eric the Unready, the Spellcasting series, and Gateway. The last text adventure created by Legend was Gateway 2, while the last game ever created by Legend was Unreal 2: The Awakening. Legend was acquired in 2004 by Atari. Other companies. Probably the first commercial work of interactive fiction produced outside the US was the dungeon crawl game of Asheton, produced in Cambridge, England, and first commercially released by Acorn Soft. Other leading companies in the UK were Magnetic Scrolls and Level 9 Computing. Also worthy of mention are Delta 4, Melbourne House, and the homebrew companies Enerby. In the early 1980s, Edware also produced interactive fiction for the Apple II as designated by the IF graphic that was displayed on startup. Their titles included the Prisoner and Empire series. In 1981, CE Software published Sword Thrust as a commercial successor to the Aimon gaming system for the Apple II. Sword Thrust and Aimon were simple two-word parser games with many role-playing elements not available in other interactive fiction. While Sword Thrust published 7 different titles, it was vastly overshadowed by the non-commercial Aimon system, which allowed private authors to publish their own titles in the series. By March 1984, there were 48 titles published for the Amen system, and over 270 titles in total as of March 2013. In Italy, interactive fiction games were mainly published and distributed through various magazines and included tapes. The largest number of games were published in the two magazines Viking and Explorer, with versions for the main 8-bit home computers. The software house producing those games was Brainstorm Enterprise, and the most prolific author was Bonaventura Di Bello, who produced 70 games in the Italian language. The wave of interactive fiction in Italy lasted for a couple of years thanks to the various magazines promoting the genre, then faded and remains still today a topic of interest for a small group of fans and less-known developers, celebrated on websites and in related newsgroups. In Spain, interactive fiction was considered a minority genre, and was not very much successful. The first Spanish interactive fiction commercially released was Ent in 1983, by Dynamic Software, for the ZX Spectrum. Later on, it was in 1987, when the same company produced an interactive fiction about Don Quixote. After several other attempts, a company emerged from Dynamic, called Aventuras AD, which was the main interactive fiction publisher in Spain, including titles like a Spanish adaptation of Colossal Cave Adventure, and adaptation of the Spanish comic El Jabito, and mainly the Ciudad trilogy, composed by La Diosa de Cozumel, Los Templos Sagrados and Chichen Itza. During this period, the Club de Aventuras AD, the main Spanish-speaking community around interactive fiction in the world, was founded. And after the end of Aventuras AD in 1992, the CAAD continued on its own, first with their own magazine, and then with the advent of Internet, with the launch of an active Internet community that still produces interactive, non-commercial fiction nowadays. Modern era. After the decline of the commercial interactive fiction market in the 1990s, an online community eventually formed around the medium. In 1987, the Usenet news group rec.arts.int-fiction was created, and was soon followed by rec.games.int-fiction. By custom, the topic of rec.arts.int-fiction is interactive fiction authorship and programming, while rec.games.int-fiction encompasses topics related to playing interactive fiction games, such as hint requests and game reviews. As of late 2011, discussions between writers have mostly moved from rec.arts.int-fiction to the Interactive Fiction Community Forum. One of the most important early developments was the reverse engineering of Infocom's Z-code format and Z-machine virtual machine in 1987 by a group of enthusiasts called the Info Task Force, and the subsequent development of an interpreter for Z-code story files. As a result, it became possible to play Infocom's work on modern computers. For years amateurs formed a small community producing interactive fiction works of relatively limited scope using the Adventure Game Toolkit and similar tools. The breakthrough that allowed the interactive fiction community to truly prosper, however, was the creation and distribution of two sophisticated development systems. In 1987, Michael J. Roberts released TADS, a programming language designed to produce works of interactive fiction. In 1993, Graham Nelson released Inform, a programming language and set of libraries which compiled to a Z-code story file. Each of these systems allowed anyone with sufficient time and dedication to create a game, and caused a growth boom in the online interactive fiction community. Despite the lack of commercial support, the availability of high-quality tools allowed enthusiasts of the genre to develop new high-quality games. Competitions such as the annual Interactive Fiction Competition for short works, the newer Spring Thing for longer works, and the XYZZY Awards, further helped to improve the quality and complexity of the games. Modern games go much further than the original adventure style, improving upon Infocom games, which relied extensively on puzzle solving, and to a lesser extent on communication with non-player characters, to include experimentation with writing and storytelling techniques. While the majority of modern interactive fiction developed is distributed for free, there are some commercial endeavors, including Peter Nepstad's 1893, A World's Fair Mystery, several games by Howard Sherman published as Malinka Entertainment, the General Coffee Company's Future Boy, Cypher, a graphically enhanced cyberpunk game, and various titles by Textfire. Emily Short was commissioned to develop the game City of Secrets, but the project fell through and she ended up releasing it herself. Some authors offer optional commercial feelies. The tradition of feelies is believed to have originated with Deadline, the third Infocom title after Zork I and II. Seeing the dual potential benefits of both aiding gameplay immersion and providing a measure of creative copy protection, Infocom and later other companies began creating feelies for numerous titles. In 1987, Infocom released a special version of the first 3 Zork titles together with plot-specific coins and other trinkets. This concept would see expansion as time went on, such that later game feelies would contain passwords, coded instructions, page numbers, or other information that would be required to successfully complete the game.